Oh wait, I was looking at myself. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. This is Abram Buter, and today we're here to talk about AAA video games. You know the type. You know the kind. There are those sick fucking bastards out there spending a lot of money and a lot of manpower making video games. And this is a hot button issue at the moment. And it has been for the last few years. AAA games are something that I think the wider inside gaming community feels is stagnating in some way. There are lots of disappointing releases. There are a lot of underwhelming releases. And Abram and I have been pondering this for a while in the way that we approach games of big budget. And the ways that we feel about them are not quite aligned with so many people. And so the thesis of this video, it's kind of a thought experiment. And if you want to play along, feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts. But the prompt is this. What are the elements of a AAA game that you appreciate that can only come from that amount of time and manpower and monetary investment? There are certain things that can only be achieved with that, and what elements of that do you personally appreciate? If the answer is none, fine.
Yeah.
Go outside and enjoy your life. That's fine by me.
Let me lay a little,
challenge yourself a little bit.
Let me lay a little bit more foundation here, if you allow me to.
Wasn't the Foundation? Wasn't that The Rock's Fortnite character? Wasn't that his name?
Yes, actually, it was.
Yeah.
So, when we say AAA, I want to give a very broad definition here,
Sure.
And I want to give it sort of in response to a lot of the criticisms of AAA production, because I think a lot of them stem from that, or at least from our point of view, even creative decisions stem from that. You'll hear a lot of talk, and there've been some good pieces recently. There's a great editorial on IGN from, I believe, Simon Cardy about their issues with the current PlayStation slate. There's a really great podcast from Jake Steinberg and over on the Critical Error show, talking about his and Peter's thoughts on the current slate of PlayStation. And there've obviously been wider conversations across our peers about the way that massive budgets, massive development timelines are leading to games that are sort of chasing trends and arriving late, are leading to games that are having to be a little bit more safe or a little bit more focus tested to recoup their investment. Games that are broadly a little bit more iterative in design because of the speed at which AAA moves. And to be clear in this conversation, there's certainly things that Tucker and I take deep issue with. I think at the top of the list
I don't.
would be layoffs.
Oh shit! Oh, I gotta stick with it. I'm a man of my word. I love layoffs.
There's no doubt very deep fundamental issues with the way that labor is being treated in AAA.
Yeah.
But I think what we want to talk about here is sort of some of the more creative arguments that people make against the AAA space, and kind of talk about why games of this stature made within this system, while shaped by that system, aren't intrinsically shaped by that system for the worse. And so I think with that in mind, we can dive into it. We've got a lot of great submissions from our community, from some other communities. But firstly, Tucker, I think that really why we're having this conversation now is that both of us have been playing and really, really enjoying Ghost of Yotei.
Yes, yeah. It's one of those games, as I'll get into throughout this conversation. I think Yotei being a good, currently relevant, but also very fresh in our minds as we're both actively playing it, touchstone of it being a really glowing example of what I think this kind of time and budget and manpower and skill can deliver that simply cannot be delivered without absent of those aspects. But I need to give a caveat. I need to give everyone a little bit of a context for this for this video and actually all future videos. If you see this side of my face a little more than a little more than you usually do, it's because I now have a two monitor setup.
This is very true.
And I need to turn my head to look at the other one. And so if I'm looking here, it's not because I hate you. It's not because I don't love looking at Abram. It's because I'm reading on a second monitor now. I'm a big boy, and that means that you're gonna be seeing a new side of me.
And now, before we get into it, what are you enjoying the second monitor?
I'm like 16 hours into using it, so I need to adapt.
Well, we'll check back in the next recording.
It's way lower resolution. than the other one. So I look at it, I'm like, the colors are fucking weird.
I'm also in a position where the monitors are of very different qualities, but the utility of the second monitor is really unparalleled. I think if you had 3 monitors, you're a freak, but I think 2 monitors is perfect.
One of the guys I interviewed on Dev Dive, I think he had 4 or 6. It was what, because he had multiple sets.
Well, then you're just in the damn Batcave.
Yeah, that's true.
But Tucker, what about Yote first before we sort of are guided more by the community? What about it really captured you and made it feel like the right game to begin this conversation?
For me, it is how it uses open world design, because it's a pretty sprawling game in its areas, but it feels just as handcrafted in every element of the game's layout in the design of the open world as a much tighter designed game. I love a Naughty Dog game. I love a more linear single player game that can frame these great moments and has these great moments of spectacle and set piece. I really appreciate the artistry that goes into something, creating something that is handcrafted and funnels you through an experience. I often find that many, specifically open world AAA games, leave less of an impact in that same area on me because, and I think this is reasonable, but you can't always apply the same amount of care and attention to a wide map as you can to something more specific. And there are just so many moments in Ghost of Yote for me where I feel as if I'm stumbling upon, just as I'm riding my horse around this open world, the camera shifts down behind me, a gust of wind, a set of leaves, a field of horses will come by, and I feel as if I'm walking down. You remember the opening moment of Last of Us 2, where you're riding on a horse looking down at Seattle. That's a line. It's a linear. You can't go anywhere there. You're going into Seattle, but it's a line. I feel as if the entirety of Ghost of Yote is those corridors, but it's actually not. And so I'm just constantly wowed by that. And I'm like, that comes not only from just a very big team that can put as much attention to detail into a wider map as possible, but a lot of iteration and testing and balancing the lighting and balancing the color and getting the animations just right. This is the kind of thing that you can only achieve that level of saturation. I'm going to call it spectacle saturation. That's what that's the word I'm going to determine to come up with. That can only be achieved with this kind of time and thought and budget put into it.
Yeah, and just for context, I checked here on Moby Games. There are 2,062 people in the credits. However, there's about 24 babies listed in the credits.
Is Sony stupid? They're hiring babies to make their freaking Ghost game? What the hell?
The Ghost of Yote babies. But yeah,
most games do that, right?
Yeah, which is fun.
The production babies.
I think that's fun.
Movies, I think, also do that.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying.
It's like, look at all this fucking we did while we made this game.
How many of those babies do you think were conceived in the Sucker Punch office?
Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak on that, given what I know.
Yeah, I actually want to sort of give my praise for Yote through a comment from our friend Brendan, but I think just to dovetail on what you were saying, for me, the world is what's most amazing about Yote as well. Yeah. Because, like, Atsu gets so small in the frame, and those mountains get so big. I'm like,
Yote does not have the Batman zone.
No. The scope of this game, or sorry, not the scope, yes, but the scale of this game to me is amazing. Like, I don't really play open world games in a way that I'm really involving myself in that much side content. Although I think Yote interestingly kind of forces you to sort of unearth the leads for the main quest, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. But we'll save that. We might even have a larger conversation about Yote.
Review of a PlayStation game on Backlog Banter?
But like, I'm happy just riding my horse through this game.
Yeah,
because I'm just so amazed by this technical artistry. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. Just like the way that you kick up leaves constantly is amazing. Like, it just, and I think this dovetails with what Brennan is saying, because he said this. I appreciate how approachable AAA games are. This might sound a bit backhanded, but so much of AAA has coalesced around very similar control schemes, gameplay loops, and UI presentation styles that in general you can competently move between games with minimal effort, or go into a new game with a basic expectation of what the experience might be like. That's good for casual players, of course, but also good for times when you want to play something without worrying about how long it will take to click. In that way, I find AAA games, especially the prestige shooters and action games, to generally, but not always, be good choices when I want something, when I want to play something to relax with. And I really relate to what Brennan is saying here. And
that's so interesting.
And that connects to my praise of Yote, because my framing of it sounds even more backhanded in that I think that there's so little that is novel about this game. I think it has some really excellent dressing on it, on the way that you follow leads, the way you use the spyglass, the way that some emergent gameplay moments unfold. But like, the stealth is fucking in 50 other games. This combat system has the illusion of depth rather than, I think, the real presence of mechanical depth. But to me, that's to the game's strength, because I'm not a sort of person who every time, like Brennan is mentioning here, every time I want to sit down with a game, I want to be challenged by it. And I don't even mean in terms of the difficulty necessarily. I mean in terms of figuring out how to relate to the world, figuring out what makes it tick. I think that there's a lot of mastery to saying, hey, look, we're going to rely on systems that are time tested. So we're not going to really amaze our players with them. What we're going to amaze our players with instead are these other qualities: sound design, art direction, scope and scale. And that stuff really does speak to me. The combat in Ghost of Yote is cool to me because of the way it sounds when you cut a guy in half with the katana.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of criticism from a lot of our peers are levied against the sword play, because it's pull out the appropriate weapon for the appropriate weapon, do the appropriate attack to the or defense to the appropriately colored attack from the opponent.
Yes.
But
it's the Ikaruga of
many are saying this. But I think, as Brennan is mentioning,
Ikaruga is a weak game because you have to flip the colors between the colors.
Exactly. What Brennan is mentioning, I think, goes to a deeper point for me, which is that the intent isn't often, I would say, mechanical novelty or reinvention. And I think holding that against a game like Ghost of Yote, to me, is not in step with the intent of the game. To me, the intent of the game is what I mentioned: the beauty, the scale, the technical mastery and fidelity. And that's why I play that game. And that's why I think it's so amazing. I don't need every game to push against me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think something that I've wrestled a lot with over the course of the last few years, as I have not only understood my taste in games more, but understood some of the criticisms and disagreements that I have with other people, and some criticisms that people have of games that I like, is that one area that I do quite appreciate games in is polish, is going down smooth, quote unquote, in a way that someone might eat a good meal or listen to a song, and it puts them in a state where they don't have to challenge themselves, but it's an experience you can kind of lose yourself in. And there are a lot of games that I've quite enjoyed over the last few years that, quote unquote, go down smooth because they have such they don't reinvent the wheel in terms of design, but they instead polish the wheel. I remember saying this in my Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart review, is that it doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it polishes it until it shines. And that's something I also felt about Spider-Man 2. It's something I felt about Pikmin 4. These are games that are less rough than their previous iterations in their series. Not that either of the earlier Spider-Man games were particularly rough, but Spider-Man 2 is a smoother version of those. And that, to me, is a positive. Where I do see a lot of people saying that that's not a positive, which is a totally fair perspective to hold, that you want a little bit of tension in the game design, that you want to be challenged a little bit more. Totally valid. But that this is an intent that I think many people appreciate, but not a lot of people champion, in particularly the criticism-based games industry, the discussion-based games industry. Championing polish is something that's kind of looked down upon, which, to your point, means that the intent of these games, like Spider-Man 2, like Ghost of Yotei, which is to be polished and to get down smooth, feels at odds with what many people in the games discussion industry feel should be the intent of games, which is to challenge their players a little bit more.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to for me is like the what you're sitting down on your couch and picking up the controller, what you have in your head as your expectations when you do that.
Sure.
Because we have this response here from our friend Joe Richards, who and I actually want to start with their criticism of AAA. Then I want to get to their praise, because I think both of these are interesting. So they say, I simply do not see Yotei as a good instance of AAA money being spent as a milquetoast open world game that iterates slightly on the game that came before and has absolutely no intrigue or interesting hope to get anyone to engage with the world beyond looking nice. I'm past the point of caring about game visuals. I've been playing AAA Sony games for long enough that photorealism is just taken for granted now.
Interesting.
And
I want to dive into that.
I think this is an interesting point that they raise, in part because I think that Joe, as in my view, a more serious critic than either of us, someone who is really writing reviews and really involved in games from that point of view, is attacking a game like Yotei from this perspective that you're saying that it is not necessarily compatible with reverence for a game like this on the basis of that polish. Well, I was gonna go ahead.
And no, read the other part from Scott.
Because then I wanted to go back to the beginning of this reply, which is AAA games can offer engaging and really badass experiences. They're the type of games I love showing to people and saying, look at how cool this is. I think of games like modern mainline Final Fantasy games, Resident Evil, Monster Hunter. And I just want to stop it there, because that's the piece to me that's most interesting, because I think another difference for me, right, is that I play a game like Yotei infrequently. I didn't play Ragnarok. For instance, I barely played Spider-Man 2. I didn't play Death Stranding.
You barely played Forbidden West. This is like
barely played Forbidden West.
This is like a every 2 or 3 years you get into one of these.
Forbidden West actually broke my first PS5.
That is true. Yeah,
I don't know why, but it did. And so I think part of this also is like, I think some sort of part of the issue I take with an argument like Scruffy's, even though I think I would actually extend an olive branch that I don't entirely disagree about the mechanical aspect of the game, is that this game is not made for the person that's playing 60 games a year.
Of course,
and it's similar to a lot of mainstream albums or a lot of mainstream blockbusters or mainstream books. Anything that's in the mainstream is not intended to be envelope pushing in the way that I think some people want them to be. This is for everybody to get involved. This is for the 3 games a year person. Go ahead.
Yes, no, I completely agree, and I think again that is a different set of expectations that people bring into this, and I like what you brought up about pushing the envelope, because I think this is where people this is the biggest sticking point, is the belief that there are certain ways to push the envelope. And that if you do not push an envelope in those ways, then you are not achieving true artistry or whatever. What did Scruffy say?
Let me reframe that, because I'm with you, but I think the best way to frame it would be that the sort of things that are often valued in the circles we run in are aspects intrinsic to the playing of the game, intrinsic to the interactive quality.
Yes, exactly. I agree.
And what's around that is is given less praise.
100%. Yes, I don't want to dive into that deeper. Is that I see the envelope. There's a spherical envelope that can be pushed in many different directions. I'll have to get the engineers on that one. We'll get that one working. But the idea that Ghost of Yotei is not pushing the envelope in any way, I would personally disagree with, because, as what I said earlier, there's a level of attention to detail in the framing of this game that I'm really blown away by consistently that I have not experienced in other games, and it sets a new bar for me. It pushes that element of the envelope of when I'm, as I was saying, like riding through a set of trees and the light is coming through just right, and the color balance has changed based on the time of day, and I'm like, this could and should be a painting. And this is just a moment that I happen to stumble on upon in a game that I could spend 80 hours in.
Yeah.
And almost every moment feels like that. That is pushing the envelope, I would say, in some way, but not in the way that some people want, which is interesting.
Well, let me also posit this to you, because we were on the phone one day when I was playing Yote, and I just reached sort of a critical moment in chapter 1, where you've had an encounter with a member of the Yote 6, and then your main quests are wiped clean. And I was like, well, where the hell do I get the next main quest from? And I looked up a guide, and the guy was like, well, you basically have to go around and do various activities in the world, because a lot of activities funnel you towards hints that unlock main activities.
Yeah.
But there is also a Ronin, traveling Ronin, type of Ronin in the game, who will randomly run up to you when you're riding through the landscape. And this Ronin has one particular function.
Yeah.
It is for you to defeat them in combat and spare their life in exchange for information about the Yote 6, i.e. your next main quest. Yote is built in a way that offers the feeling that you are here to unearth secrets and propel the storyline forward. But that's not actually true. The reality of the game design is that you are never going to be more than a couple minutes away from the next thing you're supposed to do. Because a game like Yote, a game like Forbidden West or Ragnarok before them, are focus tested to hell and back to make sure that the 15 million people who buy this game, a significant, as high of a portion as possible, plays as much of the game as possible. And I think that is brilliant. I don't look at that as a concession, or that the game isn't equipped with enough friction to force me to trawl for secrets. I want to feel like I'm finding things. I don't want to have to go to the work of doing it, to be honest with you.
Sure.
And I think that
in this particular circumstance, there may be other games that you wish that was the case.
Right. But for something like this, where I just want to sort of immerse myself in this world, and become lost in it, I don't want to be taken out of it by being literally lost. And so the way that a game like this functions to be one step ahead of that feeling and deploy that Ronin when it's time is a sort of thing you only get through focus testing, and the thing you only get through the imperative to make your massively budgeted game a success. And that's not a negative to me. That's not a concession. That's a brilliant stroke of design.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's, again, goes to the point of things going down smooth.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference in opinion on something like that of a example that's brought up many times as a criticism of a lot of modern AAA games is the lack of giving a player the space to fail puzzles without giving them hints on how the puzzles are.
Hey, Kratos, throw your axe at that thing.
Yeah. But even Atsu will sometimes say, like, oh, I might try this, or like she'll say something. There's a lot of vocalization of answers that happens in these games, and again, focus testing. I think that's something that people can differ with, but I come on the same side as you of that is it is polished in a design sense that I think people don't usually give credit to.
Well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to ground this in our perspectives for a minute. Because I think we've shared a lot of, from my view, very useful and underappreciated aspects of a game like this. But I'm curious just to take a pause and sort of interrogate why this stuff is cool to us. Because, as you're saying, it was something like the way that focus testing results in these gameplay shaping choices. To me, is a positive. I think to you is a positive. So I'm curious if you've thought at all about why you as a player like these things.
I think, especially in the context of a game that is open world in the way that Yotei is. My preferences broadly and history with games is I prefer linear games. I like being told a story. I like being guided.
Yeah.
Film is another one of my favorite artistic mediums, something that you have no choice in and you are guided along. And I really enjoy a tight screenplay that leads breadcrumbs and gets you thinking and then wraps things together. And that kind of being guided is something that I think I take from my love of film to my love of games. Is being guided along a story is something that can be very compelling to me. Where I think video games are, I would put them maybe even above film in terms of my preference for the medium, is that I can choose to diverge from that path if I want to. I find myself often in games that I really love getting this, like, it's this awkward feeling, but I know I like it, where I can't wait for the next section of the game, but I also don't want to leave the section of the game that I'm on.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling that with Yotei, where I'm like, oh man, I really want to find out what's next in the story, but I also really want to be doing this open world stuff because I really enjoy the side missions here. And there's this ebb and flow where I can't wait to get to the next thing, and I'm enjoying the current stuff. And it's because I know that there is that very guided path that I can just enjoy as if it was a film in terms of being guided along. And I get to choose where I feel that push and pull. And the fact that these games are tested enough to, I think, to allow that flow to feel natural. Because some of the worst parts of games are when you are forced to do what the game wants without an option. Not as much a problem in like linear games, but like I always think about when a game like blocks you off from going to like World 4 because you got to get 45 widgets. And I'm like, but I beat a bunch of levels. Now I got to go back and like scour one of the levels to find this. Like I feel as if I'm being pushed by the game's design to do something that I was not ready to do or interested in doing. And these bigger AAA games usually aren't particularly interested in doing that. And so it ends up being something that I appreciate, being given that choice and letting it feel natural of if I want to be on a guided path or not.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I like what I like about what you're saying here is that it speaks to a quality of AAA games that I think is underappreciated in that they bend to the player.
Yeah,
and I think that's I think that's very interesting, and I like games that do that because I think that the reality of game playing for me is that in most cases it's a way for me to relax, and I think that when I'm looking to be challenged more, typically I'm looking more towards books and film.
Sure.
And so for me, when I sit down to play games, I'm not sort of saddling them. I'm not saddling them with an expectation that the game itself doesn't deserve. So for instance, I'm going to be thinking a lot more about how the mechanics and the script and the pacing and all the aspects of game design are working together to like consume me. That is a little bit more of a singular experience than I'm going to be in Ghost of Yotei. Two games that I love, two games I think are beautifully artful, but one of which I'm playing to sort of interrogate a character and sort of in have a sense of their interiority, and one I'm playing simply because I'm tired and I think that this is easy enjoyment, and I think that to me that's not a value judgment.
Sure.
I don't need my games to be more than that most of the time.
Yeah, and you also don't need all of your games to achieve the same purpose.
Exactly.
You can appreciate them for different reasons.
It's the same way that even if I often go to film more to be challenged, I love a lot of stuff that is not challenging.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
The least challenging thing that you personally can do is rewatch a Star Wars movie, something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, or like a lot of like the Hong Kong action films I watch. They exist for the kinetic enjoyment of the martial arts. And
there's a little difficulty. You got to get over the 1-inch barrier.
That's actually true. That's actually almost impossible.
Which, by the way, is what they called you in high school.
So I think for me, it's partially because I when I'm sitting down to play a game, I'm usually like quite tired. Most of my gaming is like the evening activity.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm just not often tuned for that. But when I am
Yeah.
playing a game that's a little bit more challenging of me, whether that be mechanically, whether that be in terms of the thematics of the game, I come for that, and I know what that is, and I don't expect something that isn't going to offer that to offer that.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of my issue that I have with a lot of conversation around AAA stuff. A lot of it to me comes down to, well, what did you expect this would be? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a question that I often don't get a particularly cogent answer to. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something that I think I would want to interrogate further with someone who disagrees with us to get an answer that I don't want to come up with someone else.
Well, let me play devil's advocate, because I feel like in the past I've been in.
What system is that on? Is that a console exclusive? Is that next gen only?
Well, actually, it's been announced for PS5 for a long time, but who knows if it's going to come out.
Are you doing a little devil inside joke?
Of course.
Yeah. What's the devil I would say?
Here's what I would say. I look at a game like Spider-Man 2, right, which I was not particularly impressed by. It didn't really move the needle for me much. I think I would look at a game like Spider-Man 2, and I would say, okay, this is now the third game in this style from Insomniac in this 5-year window.
Yeah.
And it's not doing much that's new. And at the same time, this is the flagship from Sony. This is going to be a game that sells way more than the other stuff they put out, that is going to be the linchpin of their casual hardcore crossover software.
Yeah. It was the only title they published that year.
Exactly. This is a game from a storied studio that used to make many things and is now sort of iterating on these Marvel titles over and over again.
Yeah.
This could be something else. This could be something more ambitious. They have the latitude within Sony, the respect within Sony to come out and say, okay, instead of another Spider-Man, we want to make another brand new IP that's a little bit more challenging, that's a little bit more novel. We're tired of making this Marvel stuff. And I think that there's a dimension that's fair, of saying, hey, look, this team that I loved, Naughty Dog is a good example of this. This team that I loved has slowed down its output dramatically.
Yeah.
The games it releases are looking more similar. What I once wanted from these guys is gone. They sit at the front of PlayStation and they get all this money, but they make something that's very similar to whatever they made just before.
Yeah.
Where I look at this from now, personally.
Yeah. What you were just saying is the devil's advocate position?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just clarifying.
What I say is, well, Naughty Dog's really good at this.
Yeah.
Insomniac's really good at this.
Yeah.
Sucker Punch is really good at this. Go play someone else's game. Nobody else can make a game like Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. I truly believe nobody else, even inside PlayStation's own studios, could have made Last of Us 2.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that could make a fucking Jack game, right?
What's the Jack game?
Like a Jack game.
Box?
Like Jack.
What are you fucking talking about?
What they made before Uncharted. What is that called?
Oh, Jack and Daxter.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I've never heard anyone just call it the Jack series. I thought Jack.
No.
I'm like, who the fuck is Jack?
I think a lot of the expectations put on these studios are expectations that they will go off and do something else that somebody else is already doing. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a game like Last of Us 2 that's better than Last of Us 2.
Sure, yeah. And I would argue in a similar breath that is, for me, also true with God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 and Rift Apart and Ghost of Yotei, is that they are building on a foundation, and I think that is a valid path forward in a way that some people might not. The final element of Scruffy's response here that I just want to touch on, and we can probably branch this to someone else's response as well, but is the idea that they say at the end is, I've been playing AAA Sony games for long enough that photorealism is just a granted now. And I think that's a very interesting point, and to me is a little bit of a tell in where specifically critics put their effort in terms of what they are willing to praise and criticize, or put particular thought into. As I'm playing Ghost of Yotei, I know yes, this is built off a very similar engine and lots of gameplay structure of a game that they took a long time to make and came out a couple years ago and was great. I do like Ghost of Tsushima quite a bit. But that doesn't mean that not a lot of work went into getting this game to this point. And so when I see photorealistic games, my first thought isn't many people have done this. It's that this project that these people worked on, it was very difficult to get it to this point, and that skill that delivers a game that runs as well as Ghost of Yotei does, that has as amazing lighting and vistas and particle effects and things as Ghost of Yotei does. That is something that deserves praise regardless of if it is similar to what other people do. I don't want to be a critic. I want to analyze games. I do not want to critique them. So this is a different perspective than I hold from many people who are reviewing games, and that's totally fine. But a perspective that I often take when I'm thinking about a game is, if someone I knew made this, would I tell them that they did a great job? And of course, that's a little bit different because, like, you're going to be a little more soft on your friends, and maybe that's a fair criticism of me, that I'm a little bit softer on games. That's probably true.
Yeah.
But if Scruffy knew someone who did the facial capture on Ghost of Yotei, if Scruffy knew someone that did the skyboxes of Ghost of Yotei or animated the particle effects of the leaves that are very complicated and natural, is that not worth? If you would praise it for someone you know, I think that it is worth praising for someone you don't know.
No, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this because I think that you're conflating the role of somebody like Scruffy, to be honest.
I know. I'm saying this is why I respect that.
Right,
and I think that there is value in understanding it from that way of that there is talent that goes into this, even if it feels blasé, even if it feels like it fits in. That doesn't mean that it was easy to do and isn't worthy of praise.
I totally agree with that, but I just think what I'm saying is from the perspective of a critic, it's not really relevant.
Yeah,
I don't think. And I also, and to be fair, I do think that if you're a critic, it's fair to hold a worldview that these things are not relevant to the quality of the game.
Sure. Interesting.
Because it's not, it's also worth noting, right, that Yotei is an extremely well-regarded game.
Yeah, yes, that is true.
And it's not, and
as frankly, as are basically every game that we've talked about today.
Yeah, and so what we're arguing against, I think, is or offering an alternate perspective on, is a view within very serious critics who view these games as being creatively short, and I think that if your emphasis is on mechanics or your emphasis is on structure and these things, I get why people don't view these games through this lens. I also think about a little bit like when David Ehrlich reviews a superhero movie and he gives it like a C. It's like, is anybody surprised by this? I think there's a degree to which, like, the critical perspective and some of the really strong aspects of a game like this are just not aligned. And I think that's
which, though, to be fair, I think the point of this video and the argument that at least I am making here is that I think that is a failing of the critical perspective in certain regards, is that I wish that the critical perspective was more receptive and respectful of the work that goes into something that is creative and is worthy of praise, but is not given that praise, is underappreciated. As we've said, I think part of this whole framing is what you're wrong about AAA games isn't that AAA games are good or bad, but that there are elements of them that go underappreciated because the critical perspective is more limited than at least I would want it to be.
Yeah, I guess all I'm saying really is just like, I don't think it's a failing of critics, really. Because again, I think if these things weren't relevant implicitly to critics, these games wouldn't be the ones that are at the top of the the industry every year, right? Like for as much as that there is a sort of resistance to this type of game among the most like really hardcore critics.
Yeah.
this game's gonna be up for Game of the Year.
Yeah.
A lot of these qualities we're talking about are why Expedition 33 has the reception it has.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I don't. Where I want to come at this from is with the knowledge that we don't make very popular videos. We make videos that are watched by a lot of our peers who disagree with our premise.
Sure. Yeah. That's true.
And so I think that there's a utility in dividing what the games press as a large conglomerate feels from what these other people feel. And I think that their point of view makes sense.
Sure.
Completely. But where I'm with you myself is that I don't care at all about games pushing the medium forward. I don't care.
Sure.
Because there's going to be games that do that every year. There always are. You want to find boundary pushing games, you can find them everywhere. That's not the job of this game. That's what it comes back to for me. And like...
Yeah. It's something that I often think about and bring up is that I do feel like a lot of understandings of the games industry, both from a critical perspective and otherwise, are based in an understanding of the games industry that has gone by. And I think this is an area where that is definitely true, in that for most of games history, frankly, the only games that could really push the envelope in terms of, not only in terms of fidelity, but basically anything, were coming from big teams, because it was very difficult to make a game. But over the course of the last, let's just say 10 years, I think the onus has shifted from the AAA games pushing the boundary of specifically game design to polishing up what has been learned in a way that polish is now what big teams can achieve that the small teams can't necessarily. Where I think the inverse was true in the past. And so we're basing on AAA games must push the boundaries on design. That is something that was true 15 years ago and is not true anymore, or isn't true largely. Of course, not entirely true, but I think that there's a shift there that people maybe don't recognize has happened. Why don't we read out a reply from our friend Daniel Navarali of Nerdic Gods fame. He says, "My favorite part of AAA games is that they push the visual boundaries and scale, where smaller games don't have the same team size and money to do so. AAA usually has great music and performances. With that being said, AAA games, especially right now, tend to be technical messes, bland, don't respect player time, aren't as innovative as smaller games. AAA games take way too long to develop. It's hard to justify buying AAA games when you pay the price of $70 or $80. Even with my negatives, I still like AAA games. I just hope the negative race to the top will stop." Very interesting.
Yeah.
He frankly, he mostly brought off why he doesn't appreciate AAA games. So that'll give us some meat to chew on.
Yeah, I like... Here's something I really like. I really like seeing money on the screen.
Oh, sure.
Similar to why I think Avatar is cool.
Yeah.
For instance. I just think, like, how are you using that? And obviously there's plenty of AAA games I don't play, I don't have interest in, that just pass me by entirely. But I think that there is a real benefit to that money on the screen quality. And I think we've done a good job of explaining.
An experiential benefit that I think goes underappreciated.
Yeah, like, but it can actually be a double-edged sword, right? Because I think about Last of Us Part 1, which is a remake I really stand by. I really like that game a lot. But because it is so high fidelity, when there are these moments of fidelity lapsing, of an animation getting kind of fucked up, or Ellie reaching to open a drawer but her hands aren't touching the drawer, it actually kind of breaks my experience a little bit more. I think it's actually a high risk, high reward gambit to make.
Interesting,
for me at least, to make games that are this beautiful. Now I do think that, I'm talking about a 30-second issue in a 12-hour Last of Us game, right? But I think that it takes, the reason I raise this is because I think it takes confidence to know that you can execute to this high bar of quality for the duration of your game. And I think that these PlayStation studios, if I can say, hey, my immersion was broken for 1 minute in this house when I open a drawer, it's illustrative of what a team like Naughty Dog can do and how very few can do that. And so what I think Daniel is pointing to here in this, when he's sharing some negativity that I think is fair, is that I think that you can say that there is a class of AA games or even some sort of on the lower tier AAA games that can't hit that same fidelity. Mm-hmm. And there's a gulf within AAA.
Sure. You know, I mean, even to that point, there's something like Mafia: The Old Country that is, I think, maybe punching above its weight in terms of the class of games people might consider it in. But the reality is that it's definitely a smaller project than many of the games we've talked about today. Where when I was playing that game, to some like Daniel's credit, what I was feeling is more of those immersion breaking moments, a little bit of sparkle around the edges that was really distracting me, a little bit of a funky animation. I felt the design being at odds with the visuals of the game, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it certainly can happen.
And like, you know, I would never deny that. Like, just as the way that indie is a somewhat useless term insofar as it encapsulates so many different types of games, I think that there's no doubt that there's a difference between a Hangar 13 and a Rockstar, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, Daniel's point here about paying the premium is interesting because I put down $70 at the store for Yote, and I'm like, I'd pay $100 for this.
Yeah.
And this is a different conversation, of course. We've actually talked about pricing as recently as our FOMO video. But the point I'm trying to make with this is that for my tastes, I'm really taken by the successful execution of this money on the screen.
Yeah, I agree. I think something that is more accepted in other things that aren't games, but that I think games fit more into than people realize, is the idea of paying a premium and accepting that premium and expecting that premium for a premium product. Is that there is a difference between a movie that is CGI focused that has a $60 million budget and a movie that has a $300 million budget. Now, that doesn't mean that a $300 million budget will necessarily be used for its fullest potential. There are plenty of movies that cost a bajillion fucking dollars that don't look that good.
Yeah.
And vice versa. There's somewhere like, holy shit, this only cost that? Goddamn. But which is like, that would be the Expedition 33, where you're like, oh, really? Like, that's pretty impressive. But where I see something similar to what you're saying, Avatar or Titanic, or these spectacle movies that have massive budgets and can only be achieved on those budgets. And you wouldn't tell James Cameron to slash the budget of Avatar, because the impact of what he's able to do and his teams are able to do with that budget results in something that is a more premium project than most, and they've reaped the benefit from it. But I think a line can be drawn in a similar way, where I also appreciate, as you're saying, the money on the screen of something like Death Stranding 2, where I see the facial animation, I'm like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me?
Well, here's a question for you, because I can't remember off the top of my head. Does the Game Awards don't have qualities like awards like Best Performance Capture, or like or like fidelity related things, like you look at the Oscars, and there are the above the line categories and the below the line categories, and I think that there's a similar reality for the Game Awards to an extent in terms of what people value, but it's not in the same way insofar as that a lot of the lower quote unquote categories in the Game Awards are just genre based.
That's definitely true. There are production ones.
Yeah.
There is art direction, which is what you might say is analogous to fidelity. There obviously is best performance, which is analogous in some way to performance capture. But you're right that there are these areas of skill in the industry that are not given those sort of flowers.
There's there's like a sound award, and we used to have 2 sound awards, but now we got 1.
Yeah.
Or we've got best hair and makeup, right?
There's sound design in games.
Is that at the Game Awards?
Yeah. Remember last year when we were like, it's gonna be one of the fucking horror games. It's gonna be Alan Wake 2. It's gonna be Resident Evil 4.
See, this is why I have to ask you these things, so you have a more acute sense of this. But like, I don't know. I guess I like that those are there, and I just didn't remember that they are, because
well, like, I think the point that maybe you're glancing by is that okay, you forgot about that is partially awarded in a high part on the show floors of these award shows, but there are these elements that don't necessarily go appreciated in conversation about games. Is that fidelity is, as Scruffy said, taken for granted when I think that it is something that deserves more credit than it's usually given.
Yeah, let's read Steven's comment here, because thinking about Avatar made me think about this. He's something that's cool about Way of Water to me. Way of Water has a way that you can read it as being very much concerned with environmentalism, to almost a point of veering into eco-terrorism at points in the narrative. And I think that there's something interesting to appealing to as big of a mainstream audience as you possibly can in something like Avatar Way of Water, getting them in with this amazingly realized world of Pandora, and then, inspiring them with this ecological messaging, this sort of ecological advocacy and fire that can maybe inspire people in the audience. And I tee this up because that's money on the screen, but it is also what Steven says here, which is I think there's a tremendous potential for the mainstream content where most eyes are on it to be challenging, daring, and interesting. Some examples in AAA space are rare but more valuable. Such examples in AAA space are rare but more valuable, and are why I remain invested in it. The grand, really ambitious, and technical ways games that AAA facilitates are still so engaging. Obviously, the smaller space pushes boundaries in a different way, but in such a tech-forward medium, there's still value in the cutting-edge stuff.
Interesting.
And I think that this is a cool point, and why... Because we also got a very short comment here from our friend Brogan, who said, Baldur's Gate 3 may be the best example of what budget production value can do for a game in the CRPG genre. Presentation and choices require extensive time and money, and BG3 does not hold back. Now, I bring this into conversation because that's a great example of a big, beautiful, expensive game that is also like socially conscious and is...
What, Baldur's Gate? Yeah.
And so I think that that's a great example of that marriage, right? And so I like what Steven is saying about the way that you can use these games to, because all games have one, even if it's implicit, have a worldview and push onto the audience something useful. Now, I would also agree with Steven, to be fair, that one of my criticisms of AAA is I don't think that is used enough. That power is used enough.
I think that's true.
A point people have been raising recently is that there's a great report from Stephen Totillo for GameFile that Ubisoft canceled a Assassin's Creed game set in the Reconstruction period over worry that there would be a sort of racist or cultural backlash to that type of game, and people are invoking the way that Sinners, for instance, is a very politically minded, culturally rich movie, and it's a massive fucking success. And I think that that's great, and I think that's part of why I love blockbuster filmmaking, because I think there's way more examples than in games of using that mainstream platform for a message, whereas I feel games are often quite timid in this way.
I think that's definitely
and so I think if I were to levy a big criticism, it would be that. But I agree with Steven's optimism that we can do that with AAA, and I would like to see us do it more. And like, that's a reason why I like Last of Us 2 as well. Yeah. Because the game is very uncompromising in its characters and in the relationships it wants to depict, and that is a worldview, and the game has a worldview that is inclusive, for as dark and fucked up as it is. Pushing that at the highest level of the industry to me is very bold and very important. And I want to see more of it for sure. And I think Baldur's Gate 3, to Rogan's point, is a great example of the technical qualities, but also the textual qualities.
Well, this might be a totally different point, but part of what I've been trying to bring into conversation in my head here is who I'm responding to when I'm talking about these things. Who is quote unquote wrong about AAA? And though I think we've focused a lot on like the critics and where we disagree with some critical perspective, I think that another group that underappreciates AAA and focuses on what I would see as the wrong things are people who are just really antsy online, frankly. Like they just say shit and they make broad generalizations, and those aren't necessarily the kind of people that I think A, will watch this, or B, I want to interact with on a particularly large level. But the disconnect between, and again, you can stop me if you think this is not relevant to this conversation, but the disconnect between what you and I would agree, and alongside Steven, that major AAA games aren't pushing the boundaries enough in terms of social messaging, and the potential to capture the masses and educate them on certain issues through their mass appeal, is the exact opposite of the problem that a lot of people who are anti-online say is the problem with AAA games, is that they're too woke, there's too many messages, everything's got to have a message and show it. And I'm not saying that these people I believe are correct in any way. I think they're focusing on the wrong thing. But it's funny that the reality of AAA games exists somewhere in the middle there, where oftentimes a lot of these big budget games and the teams behind them are created by liberally minded people who are inclusive and include these elements in their games. And you see pride flags in Suicide Squad, and you see disability representation in Spider-Man and these things. But for then the inner group, it's not enough.
Yeah, but
it's a really interesting balance.
But see, I don't agree with the framing of this, because I don't think that a lot of that stuff is having a perspective. I don't think putting pride flags in the game is a perspective. I think that's just a nod. I don't think that that's useful.
Sure.
I think that basically any tweet with over 10,000 likes about how, like, you got to make Atsu's tits bigger, or because that's why the game didn't sell well, is a stupid person. Yeah. And I don't care what they have to say. I think that there is a degree to which we imagine that there's a alternate point of view on this topic that is useful, and I don't agree with that.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough.
And I look at what Ubisoft, through the reporting of Stephen Totilo, will cite as, they'll cite that backlash and be worried, and I'm like, I think you guys are out of your fucking minds for thinking these people are that big of a force, because I just think you can look at examples of the contrary over and over and over again, and Sinners is a beautiful example of that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think about the fickleness of that crowd as well. Baldur's Gate 3 went from being a paragon of what games should be to, there was a turn and people are like, well, there's LGBTQ representation in this game, so actually it's too woke. It's like, these are not serious people. And they've allowed us to frame the presence of diversity as more of a political worldview than it is. And I just that's where I agree more with somebody like Steven, who's not even going that explicitly to say it, of just like, I think there's a lot of work that games can and still need to do to have
I agree.
A little bit more like toothiness to them. Sure. You know, something that Scruffy had been saying about Yote when we had been talking at another time is that the dialogue is very like video gamey. Like it's a lot of perfunctory dialogue.
Sure.
And I agree with that. I think that's a fair criticism. And it's like, okay, well, there's an argument, I think, that some of these game scripts could be a lot richer than they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get what you're saying, but I think that anything that goes viral on Twitter is like so stupid.
Sure.
I don't disagree that crowd is out there, but it's like, are they worth engaging with? Do they have any kind of like idea to attack? Yeah. My answer is probably not. Sure. I think they're just racist or bigoted in some way, and it is what it is.
I agree with that. Yeah. I think actually we got through most of our responses here, but we have one from our friend Adam Hurd who says, here are the things that Adam likes about modern AAA games. It's that the idea that this focus on production values and budget can excel what would normally be a niche project into something much bigger on a cultural scale. Something like the new God of War games do this incredibly well. God of War on the PS2 was big, but only really as big as the hack and slash genre could go, and as big as its contemporary in Devil May Cry. Thanks to a big refocus on what God of War is, they've gone from a kind of obscure, overly violent button masher to this award-winning narrative colossus with incredible acting and writing talent to really draw people in. God of War is no longer focused on its combat in the way that Devil May Cry 5 might be, but instead focused on the performances of Christopher Judge and the rest of his cast to carry a dramatic HBO grade level TV plot. HBO grade TV plot, whatever. You get the comparison. This is interesting. I think this is another area where we've been talking mostly about spectacle. We've talked mostly about fidelity, but I do think that focus on narrative and focus on performance is an area that I personally gain a lot of appreciation for out of AAA games. The amount of smaller than AAA budgeted games that I think have truly impressive performances or narrative in them is comparatively slim for the most part. When I play a game that is not on the biggest budget level, it is something that I appreciate more for its mechanical innovation, for its gameplay, and not as much for its narrative. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but a lot of the time when I am playing something that is massively budgeted, I am going to it for a story, and I often find that for me, the narrative is what ends up really resonating with me and sticking in my mind the longest. When I think about God of War Ragnarok, I remember enjoying the gameplay quite a bit and thinking the levels were fun and getting collectibles and stuff, but I think mostly about the power of that narrative and the performances and the way the cast interrelates to one another. And same with Last of Us 2. I mean, some people might say the fact that I do really like the gameplay in Last of Us 2, but it's not my favorite part of the game. My favorite part of the game is the story and the characters and the performances and the writing.
Yeah.
And, well, there are people who would say that's a failing on that game's part for not placing more emphasis on its mechanical engagement versus its story. I would just simply disagree and say that an area of these massive budgeted games that is very difficult to achieve otherwise, that I find they often do achieve, is in a focus on narrative and succeeding in it and really, really personally engaging me on that level.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but I think where I would adjust that a little bit is I think the gameplay is the story too, and I think that that's something these games are really good at. Like Last of Us 2, the fidelity with which they depict the way Ellie like assassinates. There's like an assassination. When you turn the camera around, and you see like their eyes like pop out of their head as you like slice their throat open. Like that's storytelling, and I think that is an attention to detail that is really important. And so you have these beautiful cutscenes, and you have these beautiful non-interactive moments that are demonstrating, as you're saying, a level of performance capture and performance that is sort of impossible if you don't have the budget for it.
Yeah,
that is then extended out into the playable moments too.
Sure.
And because these games look so good, they have so much money, the gulf between what's pre-rendered and what isn't is so slim that it becomes very continuous. And I think that's why I push back a lot on the idea that there is this separation between gameplay and narrative in such a stark way, because I think they're collaborating with each other. And I think that part of the trick of games of this scale is that there's not much of a visual difference from the playable section and non-playable section. And one thing I always love about games of this scale is the way that the camera moves from a in-engine cutscene back into the playable state, where I'm like, this is one long flowing experience that I'm having.
Sure. Yeah. And I appreciate that seamlessness, something that games actually, especially recently, have been able to achieve on a much higher polished level because of innovations in technology, primarily the SSD of the PS5. I mean, the amount of times that I've been truly impressed by a transition between cutscene and gameplay, or between different areas of gameplay, because of the again, another element I think is underappreciated, the amount of like polish and time that goes into properly technically achieving something like zapping between places in or the dimensions in Rift Apart, or in Alan Wake 2 when you swap into the dark place, or even in Ghost of Yotei when you can just tap the touchpad and it shifts to Yatsu's childhood. Like, these are things that help narratively, they help mechanically, and they can only be achieved on this level with people that are really optimizing a game experience.
I forget the character's name, but my favorite example of this is in Alan Wake 2, when you go into her mind palace.
Yeah.
What is her name? I don't remember. It's not relevant.
It was just there. Oh, I'll get it. Keep talking.
I think her name is like Cindy.
No, I don't think that's true.
I fucking can't remember for the life of me.
Saga
Anderson. I'm like, of course. Hey, I had the right sound. But yeah, I want to quickly just shout out. We have a comment here from Yomagale, is I think how I would say it. I like AAA games. I need to recharge my sicko battery. Yomagale is a member of the Crawl community where they're playing.
Yes.
They're playing some
fucked up
shit.
They're concocting games that there's some arcane stuff going on there.
When I need to recharge my second
it's really, for me, it's the dark web of Discord.
Or when I'm in a mood to munch Doritos and sip Mountain Dew, and I like this as a sort of capstone again on my point of view of, again, I'm coming to these games with a different expectation and different priority in mind. I just wanted to make sure we got that in because it's a short one. It kind of slipped past the goal for me when I was scrolling the document. But we have one more here from Cheekums, which I think is a great final topic to hit on.
Sure.
There's a totally different dimension of AAA gaming. And Cheekums says, honestly, the granularity of settings I really appreciate most of the time, especially accessibility stuff that smaller games don't have the manpower for. So Cheekums is referring to, and Tucker and I actually recently had a conversation about this, how you might put on a game like Last of Us 2, and you can very granularly adjust for having the game meet you whatever level of physical ability you have. But then also the way you might play a game like most recently Silent Hill F, when you can choose discrete difficulties for the puzzles versus the combat.
Yeah.
The earliest example I can remember of this personally was Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I remember being quite interested by that, especially because I got that game pre-release and I'm really bad at puzzles, so I was like so excited that like I wasn't gonna get stumped trying to write this review because I could like put the puzzles on baby mode. But I think this is a really interesting point because it requires, and it's sort of a different philosophical point, but on simply a production level, having to create so many different versions of a puzzle or of a combat encounter really is a testament to the number of people you have on the team and the amount of time you have to make the game.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think this is something that, again, also goes underappreciated, mostly because in the game's discussion spheres, there aren't many voices of people who engage with granular difficulty. A lot of people are serious gamers, and their skill level matches the fact that they don't need those kind of options to appreciate the game. I personally find myself engaging with it slightly more than your average hardcore games discussion person, in that I do like my games to be easy, frankly. I'm not there for challenge, and so I often play my games on a easier story difficulty. I will often go in and change difficulty or mess with things if I'm not enjoying the experience, because again, I like things to go down smooth, and these games give me the options to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were mentioning, because you're kind of talking about why these games and these design choices speak to you personally, and I was mentioning this idea of bending towards the player. And I as sort of a thought experiment, I wonder, like, what would it be like if some of these designers had to say, okay, this is the one case. And we offer accessibility options, we don't offer sort of the gameplay tunings, what some of these games would look like. But if I'm speaking most just experientially, and I think that's useful in this conversation as the way we're framing it, I like that I can play a game like Star Wars Outlaws and turn the combat difficulty up and turn off some of the dumb mini games. I think to me, this is a good point to end on, because what I think what it's speaking to is the fact that I enjoy playing a game just to be in its world, and that can mean many different things. But I appreciate when I'm playing a AAA game that simply says, "Hey, look, we're going to take you out of this as little as possible. And if you need to go and you make some adjustments for that to be your experience, go ahead and do it. But we just want you to get lost in here. But not too lost. And I like that. I don't always need high friction. And I often don't want it. And so I think that we represent honestly a pretty broad group of people, but a group of people that are maybe not engaging in this conversation so directly and so specifically. So I appreciate taking the opportunity to maybe, if nothing else, lend an articulated perspective to why something like Yote is excellent, that goes a little bit deeper into the philosophy of why Because I think a lot of this honestly is implicit in why people laud the game as much as they do.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. It's just a lot of this stuff isn't said.
Yeah.
A lot of it is taken for granted. And again, that's the closing full circle point here is you are not wrong if you don't like Ghost of Yotei. That's fine. Doesn't really bother me. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes it might, but I won't admit it. But I do think people are wrong not to see these elements of games that I think do deserve praise and hand wave that away. I think accessibility options are one thing. I think visual fidelity and polish and these things that are more easily achieved with a big budget and very specialized roles. You're not going to get as excellent of lighting, or you're not going to get as excellent of X, Y, and Z if people aren't specialized in roles, which means you need to have a wide variety of people working very like honing their craft on very specific things.
Yeah.
The role of a lighting designer or a physics designer or things like these are not just game designer, game director, things that you might see on a smaller team where people have to wear multiple hats. But those roles have artistry in and of themselves, and that goes underappreciated when we take a macro look at a game instead of thinking about it as a sum of parts, those parts of which I think often go underappreciated. And of course, there's just different perspectives you can take to things. For some people, a game having super high fidelity may not be positive. It might not be the visual style that they appreciate. Okay, go have fun. But I do think that saying that it isn't a benefit, I think there's an issue in that as well, because that it's a benefit to a lot of people. It's a benefit to me. I like seeing when games look a lot better than what else I played. I also like when games look like dick sometimes. That's fine by me. I try to appreciate the variety that the games industry offers, and I see from my peers a lot a unwillingness to respect the craft once a team has gotten or a budget has gotten to a certain size, and as if there's this threshold where once you put so much money or time into something, it becomes less artistic. And I think that is something that I bristle at and push back against and want to try to refocus on, where there's I think a respect for the craft and appreciation of it that can be applied to all scales, even the ones that are at the very top. And yeah, maybe they're part of a giant corporate overload that has issues. Maybe they have had layoffs, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still artistry in there that can be appreciated on its own merits.
Yeah. We'll do next time, Tucker, that we convene. We'll do this same exercise for quadruple A.
Oh!